Hello and welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. In this session of the top topics of the week, we'll delve into 5 most important topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express. So let's explore each topic in depth so that you're well informed and prepared for the examination. So let's kick off with the first topic.
RBI leveraging artificial intelligence to crack down on Mule bank accounts. Okay, so here the RBI has actually created an AI powered tool, and that is actually called as the Mule Hunter AI. So here you need to understand what are these Mule accounts and how these Mule accounts are used in the process of money laundering. Okay, so in this particular article you will be discussing about we'll be discussing about the Mule accounts as well as the RBI Mule Hunter AI initiative. Very important, because they might ask Mule Hunter recently seen in news as an initiative of which of the following organizations. Okay, that time you need to know that it is the RBI. Now it is important for the mains examination also under GS paper 3 Indian economy, and these are somewhere issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, development, as well as money laundering, that is under security. So here in 2017 there has actually been a question on sustainable structuring of stressed assets. So this scheme was recently seen in news. So what is the scheme about? So here it is actually an AI developed tool. So what is it about is what we will discuss. Okay, so as I told you, the Reserve Bank has come out with mulehunter.ai in order to curb, and you can say in order to detect. First you need to detect this kind of money laundering or the cyber frauds that have been happening, and also to mitigate the misuse of bank accounts in the financial frauds. Okay, now moving forward, let us see how this entire process actually happens. Let us actually see who is a money mule. Let's first solve one by one. Who is a money mule? For example, if there is a person who wants to commit this crime, okay, or the you want to say financial fraud or the cyber fraud, he actually gets in touch with this person and makes him create a bank account. Okay, so all the money that has actually been earned so far through this cyber frauds, what happens, they actually get deposited in this particular account, and the person's account which is used knowingly or unknowingly for these cyber frauds, that person is a money mule. So what happens is that this money mule opens the bank accounts. So after that, all the illicit money that has actually been whatever you have earned through cyber frauds, it is actually deposited into the mule's account. And then what happens, in order to reduce the in order to reduce the chances of being tracing, okay, so in order to reduce the chances of being traced, so you don't want to be traced, right, from where, or the source account from where this much money got deposited. So in order to reduce the chances of being traced, what happens, the money mule transfers the funds into the accounts as instructed by this particular criminal. Next, what happens is that in order to further dilute it, it actually goes to all the third party accounts, and from there what happens, money is withdrawn from all these different accounts. Either that, then what happens through this entire process, here the money is also withdrawn, at the same time this lump sum amount is also not traced. Okay, either it is actually withdrawn as money or it is converted into cryptocurrencies. These are unregulated currencies, right? So this is what it is. Now moving forward, let us see what is a money mule account. You know that, right? These are bank accounts that the criminal used to launder the illicit frauds. And also, what is money laundering? You are actually disguising the black money and you make it appear as if it has actually come from the legitimate sources. So this is called as money laundering. Now moving forward, this is how money laundering actually takes place through three processes. One is placement, then layering, and finally integration. So what is placement? Here you actually have earned a lot of money or wealth. So accumulating that money from the illegal activities and placing that money, that is, you made them create an account, now you're placing that in the financial system. So placing the money into a financial system, then what happens? You are transferring the money to hide the origin of funds, and finally you're returning the money by withdrawing it to the launderer itself in order to spend. So this is actually the process of money laundering that actually takes place. Okay, now moving forward, let us see here what are money mule accounts. So how it is actually being created? It is created by misleading individuals. That is, you mislead an individual saying that, okay, you open an account for me. So the cyber fraud actually does not go and say, see, I'm doing a fraud or a crime, you help me. That's not how it is done. They actually say there are people who do not have the technical expertise or any kind of financial literacy. So you go to them and say, and poverty is also one of the reasons, and also unemployment is the reason, because when you go and say you need to open this bank account for me and you're going to earn a regular amount of income on month basis. Okay, so that is how. So you mislead the individuals with low technical literacy and financial awareness, and the victims are generally promised easy income. And also, what is the implication? Here what happens is that the person who persuades you, right, that is that particular person, the account holder, that is a money mule, you become the prime suspect. For example, if I am opening it for some other person, I become the prime suspect during the investigations in case I get caught. Next one, there is loss, the financial loss also, and also there are legal fines and the repercussions that the money mules actually have to face. This is how it is happening. The prevalence, if you see, there have been almost 4,50,000 mule accounts that have actually been frozen in the year 2023 by the Indian government. Okay, and this has been one of the major causes of the financial frauds in India, is what has actually been found. Now moving forward, yeah. So now if you actually look at this AI tool, this has been developed why? In order to address the inefficiencies in the traditional fraud detection system. The traditional fraud detection system is that it very, very rarely has, the success rates, or it is very, very slow. And moving forward, this is actually a research, or it is a collaboration for between the Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, that is the RBIH, and partnered with the banks, okay, different banks. And what they have done is they have actually used artificial intelligence and and machine learning in order to understand what are the patterns in which these cyber frauds actually take place, by bringing out, very, very sophisticated algorithms. So here, rule-based detection systems versus analyzing. They have actually analyzed the transaction patterns and the account behavior by writing algorithms. And next is, it actually processes, if you see the efficiency of this AI powered tool is that it is actually faster and it has greater accuracy. And behavioral analysis is, so far it has come up with 19 distinct patterns of mule account behavior. So it is actually very, very precise in detection.
Here the Supreme Court said that reservation cannot be given based on sole religion. So what exactly is the case? Let us understand. Now in the year 2010, the West Bengal government, right? The West Bengal government in the year 2010 issued OBC certificates, or it subcategorized OBC, OBC A and OBC B, which means this government subcategorized the OBC and gave reservation to different castes in the OBC category. Now, it is said that the OBC certificate, majority of the OBC certificates were given to Muslim communities. Muslim communities, right? So, of all the OBC certificates that were given in the year 2010, majority of the OBC certificates were given to the Muslim community, right? There were 77 Muslim communities, and the West Bengal government gave the OBC certificate to the Muslim community. In the year 2012, right, the state government, West Bengal government, made a law named backward classes other than scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So, in the year 2012, West Bengal government made a law thereby giving 10% and 7% reservation to OBC A and OBC B. So, various categories were made under OBC and 10% reservation was given to this and 7% to this. Now, this law was challenged in the Calcutta High Court. Calcutta High Court declared that this particular law is unconstitutional. Why? Because West Bengal or the Calcutta High Court said that there is no survey or research done on the basis of which West Bengal government gave reservation to the Muslim communities. Calcutta High Court believed that the West Bengal government on the basis of religion gave reservation to the Muslim communities, and so it said that this law is unconstitutional. A reservation can be given on the basis of backwardness but not on the basis of religion. Right? So, High Court in the year 2024, Calcutta High Court, it struck the 2012 Act. Now, the West Bengal challenged the Calcutta High Court decision before the Supreme Court. Recently, and this is the context, the decision of Calcutta High Court was challenged by the West Bengal government before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that or asked the West Bengal government to submit a report to justify that the Muslim communities who were given the reservation benefits were backward, which means you need an evidence. The Supreme Court asked the West Bengal government to submit an evidence showing that the OBC certificate given to the Muslim communities were based on report or substantial report, a report backed by evidence. Now, the West Bengal government has to file a reply to the question asked by the Supreme Court. This is the topic. This is the topic that appeared on the first page on the Hindu paper. But let us also try to understand few how the reservation policy in our country came into being. Now, if I talk about pre-independence era, right? In the year 1882, for the first time, Jyotirao Phule and William Hunter, they demanded reservation for the backward classes. Then, in the year 1902, for the first time, Rajarshi Shahu of Kolhapur is in Maharashtra. Rajarshi Shahu gave reservation to the backward classes and the non-Brahmins. For the first time, reservation was given by Rajarshi Shahu. Now, the Government of India Act 1909, provided separate electorates for the minorities, And then in the Government of India Act 1935, representation was also given to women and other classes of citizens and other, for example, the laborers were given representation, the backward classes were given representation. So this is how reservation was before independence. After independence, post-independence, once India got independent, post our constitution coming into being, the reservation was given only to the SCs and STs, which means a reservation was given on the basis of caste. Why? Because on the basis of caste, right, India had experienced pervasive discrimination on the basis of caste. And as a reason, on the basis of caste, reservation was given only to the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. But then in the year 1990, reservation was also extended to the other backward classes, that is Mandal Commission. And again in the year 2019, reservation was given to the economically weaker section. People, families who are economically poor, reservation was given to the EWS as well. So, the SCs were given 15% reservation, the STs were given 7.5% reservation, the OBCs were given 27% reservation, and EWS were given how much? 10%. So 49.5 plus 10 percentage, 59.5% reservation. This is post independence. So as I told you, SCs 15, STs 7.5, OBC 27, EWS 10, and which means the remaining, that is 40.5 percentage was reserved for the general category. Now, what do you mean by horizontal reservation? So, let's say we have 27% reservation to the OBCs, right? Now, to give reservation in the OBC category, for example, here let's say we are making reservation, which means 1/3 seats in the OBC will be given to women. Let's say 1/10 seat would be given to differently abled. So, SC scheduled caste is a vertical layer. In the vertical layer, we are giving representation to different sections in that vertical layer. Now, if we talk about the scheduled caste, let's say, if I talk about the scheduled caste women or the differently abled people in the scheduled caste, their condition relatively to the men is much more or much worse or rather poor. So, here through horizontal reservation, our constitution or law is trying to address the growing disparities between the different categories in the same vertical category. So let's say we are OBCs, then in OBCs we have women, then we are differently abled. So here we are also trying to address the specific needs of different section in the vertical layer. This is known as horizontal reservation. So types of reservation, vertical, SCs, STs, please you can read, right? And make sure that you are opening the link in the comment box. This link will take you to the DNA notes. In the DNA notes on our website, you can revise the points that we have discussed in the DNA, right? So, we give reservation in the education sector, the central educational institutions, in the employment, then reservation is given in the Lok Sabha, state assembly, local panchayat to the women, right? And these are the constitutional provisions. 15 fundamental right? So you can read the constitutional provisions for the different sections of the society, SCs, STs, OBCs, women, right?
So here for prelims as well as mains, this topic becomes highly important. You can be asked a question in the mains which broadly wants to know about India's space program, what are India's achievements in this space program. And the topic given in GS paper 3, achievements of Indians in science and technology, it directly relates with this topic, right? Now you can read this previous year question of year 2019. What is India's plan to have its own space station and how will it benefit our space program? So you need to know our space program and you need to know about our space station program also. Now, what is the context? The writer over here is arguing that India's space program is developing, it's going in the right direction. And right now, we have some ambitious goals for the next 10 years to come, for the next decade. For example, we are planning to bring in this next generation launch vehicle. We are planning to develop our own space station. See, hardly we see any country having their own space station. So we have a very ambitious target in mind. So that's why we want to know how our space program actually started, what all things have happened till now. We say that this space program started at the time of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So in the time of 1960s, we see the foundation led in that time. So initially we started with this particular committee, Indian National Committee for Space Research. In short, we call it INCOSPAR. It's a committee which was constituted, and it was constituted on the recommendation of Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. Now, he's a very famous personality. We call Dr. Vikram Sarabhai as the father of India's space program. So he recommended to form this committee, and the task this committee had was to start or initiate the space program in India. To start with any program, let's say they were making some initial satellites, they were making some experiments, all that was part of it. So what was the achievement of this particular committee? Firstly, they launched some sounding rockets. Now, what is sounding rocket? Well, just like any other rocket, this is one rocket, but this rocket is made only for the experimental purpose. Let's say scientists want to experiment something. They just want to check how long a satellite can go, what can happen in this particular mission. So for that, the rocket they make, experimental one, for scientific purpose, that is called sounding rocket. So initially in the year 1963, sounding rockets were launched by this committee. Then India's first satellite Aryabhat was launched. That was also done with the help of this particular committee, INCOSPAR. Okay, but it's a committee, it is not an institute as such. So in the year 1969, this committee was transformed into an institute, and this institute is our ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization. See, forming an institute is very important because committees will keep on meeting with some frequencies or periodically. Means, let's say they meet today, they might meet after 6 months, 4 months, whatever. But when you have an institute, that means you have dedicated that institute for that task only. You will give them some funding, they'll recruit some people, and they will continuously work on that, and they will come up with new innovations. So ISRO is whatever we did or what institutionalization we did. This is a major step, we can say. Then in the year 1972, we have made our institutional structure more better or more sophisticated. So first of all, we constituted this Space Commission. Now this is an important body because this is the body which takes the final decision on what to do with respect to space. So we call it highest decision making body. See, usually whenever you're making policies, whenever you're taking up any decision, there are two levels. One is at the top where policy decisions are made, the major decisions are taken up, the vision is set. Second is the implementation part at the ground level. So that implementation is done by other organization or other body, that is Department of Space. So we have this decision making body which is Space Commission, and the Space Commission directly reports to Prime Minister of India. So you can understand how much important this body is. Okay, after that, Department of Space has to ensure that whatever decision is taken by Space Commission, they are going to implement it, so that implementation will happen. Now, one important fact, that this Department of Space is led by Secretary of Department of Space, and that secretary is usually ISRO's chairman. Whoever is the chairman of ISRO is usually appointed as the secretary of this Department of Space. So this dual role ensures that whatever Space Commission has decided, this person is in a position to actually implement it, because overall ISRO has to do the major tasks. Clear? Now see the most important developments of India's space program. It's not like India has just spent few satellites as such, but I have taken up a list which we consider as most important or key developments. For example, we start with 1963 when we actually have gone for our first launch of these sounding rockets from this Thumba rocket launch, right? But this is something very minute thing. That was our initial step. Later on, we developed launch vehicle. What is launch vehicle? You can call it a rocket. So you must have seen how satellites are launched. There is a rocket just like this. There will be different stages in it, and this rocket will move ahead to put a satellite in the orbit. Now we call this part as the launch vehicle, which is going to launch. So that's why it's a vehicle which is going to launch a particular satellite. So we first developed this satellite launch vehicle SLV-3 in the year 1980. Later on, we developed a better version in the form of Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle in the year 1993. Now, this is very important. This Satellite Launch Vehicle, that is PSLV in short, this is one of the most important launch vehicle India has ever developed. So, whatever number of satellites India has sent in the space till now, maximum of them have been sent using this PSLV. We call it workhorse of ISRO. Okay, very important. Then for larger payloads or to go for a very long distance, we decided we will build another launch vehicle, that is GSLV, that we developed in the year 2001. We call it Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle. Right now we have this one also. And then we started our missions. For example, we started this Chandrayaan mission. So we have Chandrayaan 1 in 2008, then 2019 Chandrayaan 2, 2023 Chandrayaan 3. We have gone for Mars mission also in 2013. So all these missions are showing that India is going in the right direction when it comes to space program. We are a leading player in the space program. Okay. Now we have some planned missions also. We talked about our ambitions. We have an ambition of Gaganyaan mission. Gaganyaan mission says that we are going to send some of our astronauts, some of our Indian astronauts to space using our own rockets. So this is the Gaganyaan mission we have planned. Then our space station in the space. Space station is just like we have for buses, we have bus station. For railways, we have railway station. For aeroplanes, we have airport. Similarly, for these satellites or for any vehicle going in the space, they can stop at a particular location, and that is space station. Even scientists can stay there. They can do their experiments over there. So we are thinking of building one space station of our own. Right now we have one international space station, but this is not owned by any country. We are planning to build our own, which is owned by India. Very interesting plan. Then we have so many plans which are about going towards any other planet. So whether it is Mars or any planet beyond the asteroid belt, this is also under plan. And fourth major thing is to build this next generation launch vehicle. So we already have PSLV, GSLV. Now we are planning a new launch vehicle called next generation launch vehicle, and this is very important. That's why we are discussing it in detail. Now we are planning that we should have a launch vehicle which can send a very large package, a very heavy package. Right now, whenever the weight of our satellite or our in any package we want to send to space, let's say we have built a satellite, and that satellite is somewhere around, let's say 3000 kg, and we want to send it in the space, let's say in the geosynchronous orbit. So we can send that. But if we want to send larger, let's say 5000 kg, right now we don't have the capacity to send it for such a large package. What do? We go to some other countries. For example, we go to SpaceX. So SpaceX has a launch vehicle called Falcon 9, which can send up to 8300 kg to this geosynchronous transfer orbit. Okay. Now, when we are comparing ourselves with other countries or other space agencies who are having such a good capacity, we want that we should also have this capacity to launch satellites which are very heavy. So this next generation launch vehicle, it is having very heavy lift capacity. So right now The best of our launch vehicle is LVM3. Okay, that is GSLV3. Its highest capacity, whatever it is, we are thinking of building a launch vehicle which has 3 times the capacity of LVM3. So somewhere around the plan is 8,000 or more than 8,000 kg of a package can be sent to this geosynchronous transfer orbit. So we are competing with SpaceX to some extent, we can say. We are becoming a global player and we want to establish our competitiveness in global arena. This is first thing. The second thing related to this launch vehicle is that it is going to be reusable. Right now what happens with PSLV or GSLV? Whenever you are sending a rocket, let's say this is the rocket. Okay, usually what happens, the rocket has started its journey from the earth's surface. First of all, this stage 1, once the fuel of this area is completely exhausted, this part of the rocket will fall. Then the second, then the third, this happens. But we can't use the same rocket for multiple missions. For example, we have sent one satellite right now using this launch vehicle. Second time, if we want to send some other satellite, we can't use the same rocket. It is completely destroyed. So we are planning, if we have a rocket which can be launched multiple times, which can be used multiple times, then we can actually save a lot of cost, because every time we have to build this launch vehicle. We don't need to do that if it is reusable. So right now the plan is, with this next generation launch vehicle, it will have the ability to be reused. Okay, so that's why we are calling it a next generation launch vehicle. Clear? Now, if we build this is going to be a tough task. If we build this will make India relatively more independent country in terms of our space programs. See, most of the world's countries are dependent on some other countries for launching their satellites. We are doing good in terms of small payloads, but when it comes to a large satellite, we are also dependent on other countries. But if we are in a position to build this launch vehicle, payload capacity is higher, it can be reused also, then we are not dependent on others. So we'll have a space autonomy for a very long term. So that's why we are calling this is a very good program. Then look at our policy. In 2023, government came up with India's space policy. The policy clearly mentions few important things, one of which is private sector's participation. Right now, ISRO is doing all the work and ISRO is under government. There's no private sector involved. So government is saying we need the role of private sector in this space sector. From building the satellite to launch vehicles, sending the satellite to space, everything should be done by private sector also. That will make things competitive. You look at USA, they have NASA as well as they have some other companies such as the SpaceX of Elon Musk. That's a private company. So we want this to happen in India. This will ensure that the space sector will grow and it will boost our economy too. Okay. Then the policy says that what should ISRO do? ISRO should focus more on the research and development. So with research, new technologies will come up, new innovations will take up, and ISRO will compete with world in terms of technology. And what ISRO should do additionally is that whatever data they are getting from their satellites, they should give this data free of cost to all the Indians. So if there is any private company, they want to go ahead with any startup, they can utilize this data. So it should be free and open. Then third thing, there is one organization to be established, that is in space, which is already established. The task of this in space would be to regulate the private sector. Whatever private sector is doing, they should be overlooked, or they should be rather regulated. So not overlooked, they should be overseen by this in space organization. So they have to ensure that whatever private sector is doing, their action should align with what our national interests are. It should not go against our national interest. And then as far as the role of private sector is concerned, we need that ISRO should go ahead with some deals which are commercial deals with private sectors. And for that deal, one other organization is formed, that is NSIL. So this NSIL is considered to be a commercial arm of ISRO. So they will go ahead with some deals with private sectors, let's say to build a satellite or to send a satellite, anything. The deal can be anything. So all these are recommendations given by this policy or the vision set by the policy on which government is moving ahead. So this is the overall or a broad picture of India's space program and India's space policy.
This was the first topic. I hope you have understood each and every dimension covered in the first topic. Let us focus on the second topic now. So the question that we have received is, are manual scavengers or scavenging there in other countries too? See, you often see the occupation with respect to manual scavenging in the developing or let's say poor countries. So yes, manual scavenging does exist in other countries as well. For example, the African continent, then the sub-Saharan region, few pockets and regions in the Asian continent. So yes, this practice is prevalent in other countries too. Unfortunately, yes, it is not. I mean, you don't have to remember as such, but yes, you can just go through it. Going through it, revising it will help you to remember all the committees, right? So in case you get a question, let's say for example, this committee recently seen in the news is associated with which of the following occupation? Such question can be asked. So if you just go through it, few times, it will help you to remember the committees and their recommendations. Now the second topic. International Labour Organization report asks nations to uphold freedom of association and collective bargaining. This is the topic. So in this article, we'll understand about the body ILO and we'll understand the report ILO has published. Now, a question was asked in the year 2017 on one of the important or specialized body of United Nations. So this is the body. United Nations Economic and Social Council is the name of the specialized body of the United Nations. Similarly, International Labour Organization is one of the specialized body of the United Nations. So questions can be expected on such specialized bodies of the United Nations. That's the reason we need to know exactly what this institution stands for. The context. Let's start with the context. Now, recently, International Labour Organization ILO released a report with the name Social Dialogue Report. Now, this report called the governments, which means it pushed the governments, it encouraged the governments to ensure or strengthen their commitment with respect to upholding the fundamental rights at work. Now, which are these fundamental rights? One, the freedom of association, and the second is collective bargaining. This report has pushed or nudged the government to ensure that the fundamental right at work should be implemented. Why? Because these rights actually, the ILO through its study got to know that these rights are declining, and that's the reason ILO pushed the government to ensure that the fundamental right to form association and collective bargaining should be implemented in letter and spirit. This is the context. First and foremost, let us understand what is ILO. Now, few facts that you need to remember for your examination, right? Headquarter. Now, these are the points that you need to remember for your examination. The headquarter of ILO is situated in Geneva. Where is Geneva? It is in Switzerland. It is one of the specialized bodies of the United Nations. Now, ILO came into being in the year 1919. In the year 1919, the Treaty of, now this Treaty of Versailles was signed after the end of First World War. This treaty, right? Now, what are the core responsibilities? Which means, what does this body do? ILO, it set standards, with standards, labor standards. It sets labor standards, which means that what should be the conditions under which the labor should be working. Labor standards, for example, minimum wage, working condition, rights of the laborers. So these standards the ILO sets for all the countries, and all the countries are expected to meet the labor standards. One. Then it also designs policies and programs for the betterment of the laborers or the employees, which means in order to ensure that the rights and the life of the employees is protected, there are certain standards set by the ILO which each and every country is expected to abide by, right? So this is the core responsibility, that is to look after the welfare of the employees or the laborers, right? Then, now this is the only tripartite structure. Tri, that is three. It involves three factions. One, the government. Second, the employers, the one who provides jobs. Third one is the workers. So, in this structure, the representatives of the government, the companies and the workers all participate in the meetings of ILO. So, I request you to remember all these points. Each and every point is important for the prelims examination. Now, what are the objectives of ILO? One, as I told you, it sets standards and principles. Now, these are the standards and principles based on which the rights of workers are protected and adhered by. So, as I told you, working conditions, minimum wage, rights of workers, or which are the rights? Right to association, collective bargaining. So, these are the rights or standards that the ILO sets. Next, next, the another objective of ILO is to create sufficient opportunities for the men and women for decent employment and income. Working in a company or a factory doesn't mean that you should be exploited. That's the reason this ILO also ensures that alternative employment opportunities are created for men and women for decent employment, which means the employment should respect your dignity. And secondly, it should also ensure that you get decent minimum wage through which you can meet your basic requirements. And then social protection. It ensures that people are socially protected, which means the factory, the company they work in should help them, should provide them pension after retirement, insurance, death insurance, which means it ensures that the social protection coverage is extended to all the workers and employees. These are the objectives. Now, this is very, very important for your examination. These are the two important reports published by the ILO. So, this again a simple question. Global wage report is published by which of the following organizations? Four options. So, I request you to please remember these reports. And these are the 8 fundamental conventions of ILO. No need to remember, but just go through it. If you just keep on going through it, it will help you to remember the conventions. Just, before examination, you can simply go through all these conventions. Now, from 2020 onwards until 2021, India was chairing the governing body of ILO, which means India was the chairman, or India was holding the position of the chairmanship from 2020 until 2021 of the governing body, right? Now, of all the conventions, India has not signed these two conventions. Of all the conventions, India has not signed these two conventions. Which are these conventions? Freedom of association and protection of the right to organize convention and right to organize and collective bargaining. So please remember these two conventions because questions again can be asked. Why India has not signed? Maybe a question can also be asked on the reason why India has not ratified this convention, because see, all the laws in our country that govern the government employees or that regulate the government employees prohibit the right to strike and criticize the government policies too. Right to strike, this is not a fundamental right. The government employees do not have this right to strike. Right to strike and to criticize government policies. Because if India ratifies these two conventions, India will be under obligation to provide the government employees with the right to strike and to criticize the government policies. So if the government employees start criticizing the government policies, who will work for the government? That's the reason India has not, enabled the government employees with these rights, right? Now, as I told you, recently, International Labour Organization released Social Dialogue Report. Now, this report focuses on the rights at work. For example, this report called for upholding freedom of association, freedom of association and collective bargaining and collective bargaining, which means everyone should have the right to form association to represent their interests. For example, and collective bargaining. Let's say you want to demand an increase of your wage from your employer. So, if you are asking or demanding in an isolated manner, individually, maybe the employer might not listen. But let's say you are teaming up, you are coming together, this is known as collective bargaining. So let's say you say to the employer that it's been 2 years, we are working in the company and our salary has not been increased. So if you come together and collectively bargain with the employer, there are higher chances that your salary or wage will be increased. That's the reason it is important to come together, form associations and collectively bargain with the government and your employer so as to meet your basic demands. Next, strengthening social dialogue. What is social dialogue? That you interact with the various stakeholders, right? Now, in order to strengthen social dialogue, right? The government should equip the labor administration, the administration that looks after the laborers, to ensure that they help the employees with resources and capabilities. Resources and capabilities. So you need to have resources and you should be capable enough to dialogue or to have interaction with the relevant stakeholders. That's the reason the government should equip the labor administration with resources and capabilities. Third, social dialogue for inclusive transitions. Transition. For example, we are heavily dependent or reliant on the fossil fuels, but now we are progressing towards low carbon energy, which means we're ensuring to reduce the carbon emissions. That's the reason we are adopting new technology. For example, EV cars. Or we are transitioning to digital economy, which means we are adopting technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning. Now, in this transition, maybe people might lose their jobs. That's the reason this social dialogue is important, so as to ensure that while we are transitioning to low carbon economy or digital economy, all the stakeholders are consulted with and take a solution that can benefit each and every one. Next, underrepresented groups. Now, the groups that are vulnerable or weak, it is important to ensure that even such underrepresented groups are also involved in the meetings, so as to ensure their demands and rights are met. Navigating global challenges. Navigating global challenges. Now, this social dialogue report focuses on the importance of social dialogue, which means social dialogue is a key governance model, it is very important part of governance. Now, which are the global challenges? For example, climate change, right? Then technological, which means we are adopting more and more technology. At the same time, the demographic shifts. Now, in this global challenges, to navigate through the global challenges, to find a way in the global challenges, climate change, transitioning to, let's say, adopting new technology, right? It is important that we focus on social dialogue through which we can interact with the government and the employers to ensure that your rights are protected and you're not, terminated or, let's say, removed from your jobs, right? Now, if I talk about India, right, we discuss about right to association and right collective bargaining. Now, right to association is a fundamental right under Article 19. So, freedom of association is a fundamental right under Article 19, which means you have the right to assemble peacefully. You can't assemble to create nuisance or break law and order. No. You have the right to assemble, but it has to be for peaceful purpose, right? Now, collective bargaining. See, the collective bargaining as such is not explicitly mentioned in the constitution, right? Now, it is implicit in the right under Article 19, which is freedom of association. We understood what is collective bargaining, right? Which means the Industrial Dispute Act, or let's say the Trade Union Act. These are the acts that provides framework for the establishment of trade union. What is trade union? It is one form of association. Now, these trade unions can come together. For example, you must see that the trade unions or the unions of the farmers, they protest. Why? Because they want some of their demands to be met or the government to meet their demands. So, collective bargaining or freedom of association is a part of our constitution. Association fundamental right and collective bargaining is implicit in Article 19. So, these are the constitutional provisions in the Indian Constitution.
That is, should the executive have the power to pardon? So here we'll actually discuss about the power of the president to pardon in the United States versus with respect to that of India. So few days back also you actually saw, right, there was martial law in South Korea. So we need to know what is martial law, and in case of martial law, what is actually the powers of the president in India with respect to that of South Korea. For that, you need to know what is martial law, how it is different from that of the national emergency, and is martial law different from that of the military law. All these things become very, very important for your examination. So similarly, anything that is in news from the developing or the developed world and how it can be compared with that of the constitutional provisions of the Indian constitution becomes very, very important. So should the executive have the power to pardon? So here The president's power to pardon in the US and India, as well as Indian constitution and provisions borrowed, become important, and these actually are important from polity perspective for the prelims examination, and for mains it can be under GS paper 2 comparison of the Indian constitutional scheme with that of the other countries. Okay, so this is what it is. Let's quickly move to the PYQ asked in 2018. India and US are two big democracies. Now, talk about two basic tenets on which the political systems of the two are actually based. Okay, so we need to discuss the two important tenets. Now, moving forward, why this particular article is in the news? Because the US president, that is the outgoing US president, Mr. Biden, has actually granted a full and unconditional pardon to his own son, that is to Hunter Biden. And this person is actually facing sentences in two cases. One is involving tax evasion. So one is tax evasion, and next is making false statements about drug use while purchasing a gun. So this is actually not important. Here what is important is pardoning power of the President of United States is what is important, and how it is different from that of India. So let's quickly see what is the pardoning power of the President of United States. So this is actually governed by Article 2, okay, that is Section 2 Clause 1 of the United States Constitution, which actually gives absolute power to the President to grant pardons except in cases of impeachment. Okay, so there is absolute power to pardon, and in case of the federal criminal offenses. Okay, so this is what the President actually has. So here this is actually started back during the period of English history itself, right from the 7th century. So here itself the presidential pardon and the powers actually had started. Next, the office of the pardon attorney, which is nothing but this office of the pardon attorney, part of the Department of Justice. This actually aids the president to pardon petitions, I mean thousands of petitions that actually come to him annually. So how is the process? Initially what happens is that the review and the background check of this particular federal crime is actually done by a federal Bureau of Investigation, that is the FBI, just like the CBI. A background check is done, and then the recommendation is given to the president. But whatever recommendation is given to the president is non-binding in nature, and the decision of the president whether to pardon or not stands final. Okay, so this is what is the pardoning power of the President of United States. So here the president, that is under Article 2 of the US Constitution, the president's pardon power is limited to offenses against the United States. Okay, what do you mean by offenses against the United States is that, or any offenses against the federal law, and this federal law, any offenses against federal law which actually applies to state as well, applies to states as well. So in this case is only what, see, we have the central list, the state list, right, and the concurrent list. So similarly what happens, there is a federal law that actually applies to the entire country, but there are state laws itself. Okay, that is why it's the United States of America. So that is what is United States. Okay, so here any federal law that actually applies to the states as well, in that the president actually has the pardon power, but he cannot pardon the crimes that are violations of the state law, and also cannot grant pardon in cases that involve impeachment. And also for the president to pardon, what happens is that crime must be committed first, right? So crime must be first committed, and once a federal crime is actually committed, the president can exercise the power to pardon at any stage. At any stage he can pardon. That is, even before the charges are filed, he can pardon, or during the progression, or when the case is going to be filed and during the process, then also he can pardon, or even after conviction, or even after sentencing. So this is how the pardoning power of the President of the United States actually works. Now let's move to the most important part of this particular topic. How are the pardoning power of the President of India actually governed? That is as per Article 72 of the Constitution, where the President is actually empowered to grant pardon, to actually reprieve, respite or remission of punishment, or to suspend, remute or commute the sentence of any person convicted of any offence. So first let us actually understand these basic terms. So what do you mean by pardon? Pardon is nothing but you are absolved or you are acquitted from your mistake. Now, once the president actually pardons you, that means you do not hold any guilt of any kind of charges. Okay, so you are completely free. So that is called as pardoning. The second one is commute. Commute is what? It is actually reducing the nature of the punishment. Okay, what do you mean by reducing? That is reducing the type of punishment. That is, if it was a rigorous imprisonment, it is converted to simple imprisonment. So that is commute. The next one is remission. What do you mean by remission? Here, the period of particular, the sentence or period of the particular conviction is actually reduced. That is, rigorous imprisonment of 30 years will be reduced to rigorous imprisonment of 20 years. Next one is reprieve. Reprieve is nothing but you are actually delaying the execution of a particular person's sentence. Okay, so delaying, so that you are actually giving him or her time to prove innocence, so delaying the execution. And finally you have respite. Here also the nature of this particular sentence is actually reduced based on certain criteria like pregnancy, like old age, etc. So these are the different terms. Okay, so pardon, reprieve, respite, remission of punishment, or can remit or commute the sentence of any person. So what are all the offences in cases whether the punishment or sentence is actually imposed by a court martial? So in that case, the president can do the following above. And then in case where the punishment or the sentence is for an offence against anything related to the union's executive power, and in all cases where the sentence is a death sentence. So in all these cases, the president can actually carry out or he can implement his particular power to pardon. Next one, we will actually see what have been the observations of the Supreme Court with respect to the pardoning power of the president. So in Maru Ram versus Union of India 1980, the Supreme Court actually held that president cannot grant a pardon independently. Okay, so he actually has to act on the advice of the Union Council of Ministers, and also the court will actually review this particular exercise of the pardon of the president under Article 72 only in rare cases where they actually feel that the president's pardon was actually irrelevant, it was irrational, discriminatory, or it is actually unconstitutional or malified. Next one, the similar thing is actually provided to the governor also. Okay, under Article 161, where the governor can actually grant pardon, reprieve, respite, or remission of punishment, or he can suspend, remit, or commute the sentence, or any kind of in cases of offences against any law which is actually related to a matter to which the executive power of the state extends. Okay, so this is actually the power difference. That is the pardoning power, how it is actually different from that of president and the governor is what we will actually see here. So in case of death sentence, the president can pardon the death sentence, but the governor cannot pardon death sentences. If the offence or if the punishment has been given by a court martial, then the president can grant pardon in case of court martial. If you see here, the governor cannot grant pardon in cases of court martial. And if you see the jurisdiction, he exercises the judicial powers for punishment under union law, and the governor in he or she also exercises the judicial powers for punishment under the state law. So the government cannot do in case of union law. So this is what it is.